All right, cool. Okay, cool. Thank you all guys so much for coming. If you guys could all take a seat, that would be great. And yeah, since it's a little cozy today, maybe if people could scooch more closer to the front, that would be tremendous. All right. I'm just going to give a little bit of time for people to sit down. Okay, cool. Thank you all. Frank, can I get the clicker? All right. Cool. Thank you guys so much for coming today. I would like to introduce our guests. We have Frank Liu today. He's the head of ML at Voyage AI. Recently got acquired by MongoDB. And after his presentation, we'll do a fireside chat with Suyash with us today, who is a machine learning engineer specializing in applying machine learning and deep learning to text-oriented domains, including natural language processing and classification and topic modeling as well. And we also wanted to give a quick shout out to Yang for doing the live streaming today. He's a
All right. Hey, my name is Yang. I'm building Qube, which is a AI live streaming and video recording tool. So if you ever hosting an event like this, it's a tech demo night or a podcast, you know how complicated and expensive it can get to if you want to record or stream your event. So Qube make it easy. Just set up a couple of phones here, and then AI will do the rest to produce pro-level video content with camera switching, visual enhancement, and also live editing in real time. So you don't need a video photographer or videographer crew. You don't need wires, and you don't need professional equipment. So that's us, Qube. If you are interested, check out our website at myqube.tv. And also you can reach out to me if you are interested after the event. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, awesome. Before we jump into the presentation with Frank, I would like to quickly introduce what we do at Qlay. We're an AI-powered recruiting platform. We focus on helping startups. Oops, sorry. Doesn't work. Can you do the clicking? Oh, there you go. So I'm Tom Nakata. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Qlay. Initially, I started out as a consultant at McKinsey, and I quit, and I started this company around 2 years ago with Toku, also a former consultant and a software engineer as well. Can you? And what we do as a service is we help other startups find, hire, and pay software engineers around the world as a one-stop shop. We incorporate a lot of AI interviewing and AI sourcing to make sure that we vet all the startups on our platform, all the engineers on our platform. So we make it as smooth as possible for startups to hire engineers anywhere, anytime, at the right rate. Normally, startups would do this using Upwork and Fiverr, but we realized that it takes really long to do this. So we are trying to incorporate AI as well as AI interviewers and AI sourcing to faster this process. Yeah. Can you actually go to the last page? Okay, last page. You can just... Okay, great. Now I would like to jump into Frank Liu's presentation. Frank, if you could come up to the stage. Okay, great. If everyone could give a round of applause, that'd be great for Frank.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the hosts, for having me here today, and also to all of you for coming out. I know it's really sunny out there. It can be a beautiful day, great day to go to the park, but it's good on you to come and come to this event and be able to learn a thing or two. So today I want to talk about AI-powered search, and I think more broadly, I want to go over. Give me 1 second. Still got to get used to this clicker real quick. Oh, okay. Yeah, but I think a little bit more broadly, I'll talk about Voyage first real quick, the company, the organization that I'm a part of. If we could go to the next slide. Oh, okay, never mind, sorry. So this is the agenda. Oh. we can start with the agenda, it's all good. So I think right off the top, I want to talk about three things. Sort of dividing this talk into three different topics. And the first one is more of just a quick refresher about what AI-powered search is, why it's important, why should you care about advancements and some of the new technologies in AI-powered search. After that, I want to talk a little bit more about techniques for AI-powered search today. So how are people building these systems today, and what are some of the tips and tricks that people are using to actually get a lot of these into production? And the last thing that I want to talk about, which I think will hopefully be pretty exciting for a lot of folks here, is also the road ahead. So where is AI-powered search going? In particular, how are we going to use a lot of these systems in conjunction with LLMs? Obviously, a lot of these large language models being all the rage today, and really go from there. And I think really high level, if we go to the next slide, really high level, if you divided these three things into, if we were to divide it into a timeline, right? I like to think about it starting first in the past, where has, all the way up to today, where are the roots of AI search, right? And why do people really care about it? I want to talk about the present as well, right? How are people getting these in the systems today, and also, again, the future. So the past, present, future, really on the agenda for this talk today. Go to the next slide. So I'll dive right into it. What is AI-powered search, right? And really at a high level, if you were to think about it, AI-powered search is the way to be able to search for things not necessarily purely by keywords, but by concepts. So a good example that I like to use is computer science and electrical engineering. If we were to go purely through keyword-based search, these two phrases would have very, very little relevance to each other, whereas in reality, I think they are very, very closely related topics. So much so that a lot of departments and colleges, EECS put together, right? So for example, at Berkeley and at MIT. The second thing is that a search system is really, more importantly, is that it finds intent. So a great example that I like to give is if I'm, an e-commerce website and I get a query, I get a search query, something like, my significant other is mad at me. What should the results be, right? What should I pull up? And ideally, maybe you pull up something like, a box of chocolates or some flowers, something to, thank you. Oh, cool, yeah. Something which hopefully makes your significant other a little bit less mad at you. But really, that is the intent, that is the meaning behind these phrases. And you really want a search system, an AI-powered search system, to understand exactly what that intent is. And then the third thing that I'll say is that these systems are usually based in embeddings, right? And for folks who are a little bit unaware of embeddings, I'll talk about it very, very briefly here. The high-level idea is that they encode the relationships between queries and documents. Or, if we were to go a little bit more general, they encode relationships between different pairs of unstructured data. Now, typically what that means is if you have a query, and then you have a bunch of documents in your database or a bunch of documents in your corpus, the irrelevant documents are going to be far away in terms of distance or in terms of nearest neighbors to a query than the relevant ones. So this is the ideal situation when it comes to building these embeddings, and when it comes to having these embeddings understand relevance as well. And obviously for folks who are familiar, RAG's been wildly successful in 2022, 2023, 2024, all the way up to today. And really, it is a flavor of an AI-powered search. If you really think about it, right? You take the results of an embedding-based retrieval strategy and you give the results of those to a large language model, and you let the large language model perform things like reasoning and a whole suite of different types of intelligence over the context that you give it. A great example that I like to talk about with other folks, and obviously in some of my talks as well, is this one with Continue. Continue is an open source AI assistant for writing code. And really, if you look at the architecture, if you look at how they do retrieval, and you look at how they pre-fill a lot of those tokens for those LLMs, they use code embedding models, right? So I think their free tier currently uses the Voyage 3 Lite embedding model, but there's option to use Voyage Code 3, and then they have re-ranking as a part of that as well, which I'll get to a little bit later. But all the way up to today, right? If you remember in that agenda, I talked a little bit about how I want to talk about the past, the present, and the future. And up to today, a lot of advancements in these AI-powered systems have sort of somewhat been driven by improvements in retrieval accuracy to the base embedding models. And even though we're definitely much farther than we're definitely much farther today than we even were 2 or 3 years ago, it's not perfect yet. And I don't know if embedding-based retrieval is ever going to be perfect, if it's ever gonna have, let's say, 99% recall or 99% NDCG at 10. I think it's probably something that would be pretty tough. But this brings me into the next area, the next set of things I want to talk about, which is in today's systems, right? If we look at RAG, or if we look at other forms of AI-powered search or semantic search, how are people overcoming some of these challenges in accuracy? How are people overcoming some of the challenges that embeddings have today to really put these systems into production? And the first thing, and perhaps the most obvious thing, is to use more techniques for doing search. So you can use, for example, a lot of folks will actually combine embedding-based search with BM25 or TF-IDF to do hybrid search. Some folks in the crowd might be familiar with that. But also another option is that you can use re-rankers as well. And re-rankers, I won't dive too much into the detail of it, but essentially it takes the results of your first stage retrieval method and it re-ranks them, it reorders them so that the most relevant ones are pulled to the top. So if you imagine the output of my embedding-based retrieval is, let's say, 100 documents, a re-ranker would be able to pull out the 10 most relevant ones out of that 100. I think another technique that people use more and more frequently today is different types of augmentation. And augmentation happens both to the queries as well as to the documents. So oftentimes when you have a query, it'll go through some sort of query decomposition, or maybe some query augmentation, right? Taking a query and expanding it to include different terms, to include different phrases using either an LLM or some other method. And also at the same time, at the document level, another technique that folks will use is they'll have all sorts of different types of metadata extraction, or they'll extract things like the file name, some headers, let's say the date, add all of those into each of those individual chunks, and then embed all of that information. So you have more contextually rich queries and more contextually rich documents, right? This is one of the sets of tricks that folks will use today. Another interesting trick is, well, trick I say, but I think it's a very valid one, is to actually use more domain specificity. And what I've shown up here is some examples of domain-specific embedding models that you can use. There's law, finance, and code, and potentially some more coming out as well. I won't dive too deep into this, but the idea is that you tailor the models in your search system, in this case the embeddings, and in some instances the re-rankers, to whatever domain of data it is that you have. And then the last one that I'll go over is what I like to call flavor of the month retrieval. So if you've heard of graph rag, or if you've heard of self rag or corrective rag, these are all very, very, I would argue that for most of these, they are tuned specifically to work for a particular set of use cases. And beyond this as well, I think there's going to continue to be different forms, different flavors of RAG coming out. And I'm not saying that these are bad necessarily, but I do think that they're very, very handcrafted, and perhaps they only work for a certain subset of those use cases in AI-powered search. So this brings me to the final few things I want to talk about, which is the road ahead, right? And I hope this is exciting for some of the folks here who are either building RAG or building some other form of search and retrieval, in that there's a lot of really, really cool things that are happening. So first thing I'll mention, well, I say the future is multimodal, but I think this is a model that's actually available today, Voyage Multimodal 3. And the idea is that instead of just taking text and embedding text and searching across text, now all of a sudden we can search across many, many different modalities of data. So this is text and images, and in particular, it accepts interleaved text and images as well. I'm not going to dive too much into a lot of the detail behind it, but really, essentially, what you can do instead of giving it some strings is you can just take a screenshot of your document, give it to this embedding model and have it generate really, really contextually rich embeddings just based on, you can sort of imagine that the model almost reads the content or reads the text inside of these, inside of the images, and is able to generate a really, really good, rich vector just based off of that. Another thing I think that is really interesting that folks building RAG and other systems will be interested in is the idea behind automatic chunking and automatic, or these context-aware embeddings. And today, a lot of chunking is done manually. You'll have some sort of recursive chunking, or if folks are familiar with LangChain, there's, I think, recursive text splitter has traditionally been one of the popular ones. And instead, if you really think about it, we're going to bake a lot of these things into the model. What we want to do is we want a model to be able to accept a really, really long document, and then it's going to be able to generate a lot of the chunks directly and automatically for you. It's going to do the same thing for the vectors as well. And each of the embeddings that's generated from the chunks is going to be very, very contextually rich. It's going to have high-level information about the whole document. There's a typo here, I apologize. It says chunk 0 on the right when it should say chunk 1. Or I suppose it should say chunk 1, chunk, it should start with chunk 0 in the middle rather than chunk 1, because folks here, most of us are probably in computer science. But the idea, the general idea, again, is that now all of a sudden, a lot of these chunks and a lot of these vectors are context-aware. And then the final sort of peek into the future that I want to go over is the idea of instruction tuning. So just as how you would prompt a large language model to do a particular task that you want, you can also do the same thing for these embeddings as well, to generate these much richer representations. So now instead of just taking a query, right, now all of a sudden you can take a query plus an instruction and then have the vectors steered based on the contents of the instruction. So to give you an example, my query could be, a common example that I like to use is, what is Twitter's Q3 or what is Twitter's Q4 earnings? And if you give it this particular query and you give an instruction saying, I only want documents that, I only want financial documents. I don't want documents, like news documents or conversational documents or anything like that. It would probably find like certain SEC transcripts or SEC filings, or it would find earnings call transcripts, and it would be able to pull only that relevant information based on your instruction out of the documents that you have. So to wrap up, right? If there were 3 things to take away from this particular presentation, what would that be? I think the first is AI-powered search, or AI-powered search systems. They understand not just the meaning behind your query, but they also understand the intent as well. And I think that's a very, very important distinction. The second thing is that today's AI search systems, they're very, very heavily engineered, right? If you want to really get into production, you want to reach that accuracy level that you really want or that you really need, they're heavily engineered and tailored to very, very specific use cases. And the third thing is that in the future, right, as we're building these AI search systems, we're going to rely a lot more heavily on intelligence built directly into the models, right? And some of those examples of the intelligence are these that I talked about earlier, right? Instruction tuning, context or content awareness, and also multimodality. That brings me to the end of my presentation. If you would like to connect with me, I've put some QR codes up there. I realize now they are a little bit small, so I apologize. You might have to zoom in on your camera if you do want to scan those. But I would love to take any questions. Do you have time for questions? Okay, perfect. I would love to take some questions if there are any out here. Or I do believe there's a live audience as well, or if there are any in the live audience too. All right, well, if you want to chat more about this, happy to do so whenever, and if you've connected with me as well, always feel free to reach out whenever. My figurative door is always open. Thanks, folks.
Thank you. I think up next, we'd love to have Suyash up on the stage to do a little fireside chat. If everyone could give applause, a round of applause for Suyash. Thank you, Suyash. Here's your mic. Okay, thank you so much, Suyash, for coming. Maybe if you could give a quick little introduction of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, of course. Hey all, so I'm Suyash. I am a software engineer at Google. I work in machine learning research specifically. To be more specific, I work on ad systems which require very low latency signals to be consumed and also delivered to the front end. And yeah, so my day-to-day basically looks like experimenting with a lot of different model architectures, different ways of training and serving large models as big as we possibly can, and yeah, trying to get the last little bit of quality and efficiency that we can out of machine learning systems. I also volunteer very frequently for Google for Startups, which is kind of an internal accelerator we have. I've been like an interviewer for startups. I've been a mentor before. So I'm also kind of connected in that way to the startup community. I also live obviously in SF, so I have a lot of very good friends who have their own companies, who are running their own startups. That's kind of my kind of like a tenuous connection to the startup world.
All right. Okay, this one doesn't work. Can you give me a mic that works? Okay, thanks, Suyash. Maybe I just want to ask the audience quickly. Any of you guys like working at a startup? Any of you guys building? How many of you guys are currently building a product right now? Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Maybe Suyash, if you could talk about, what's like a safe bet to do as a startup rather than, a big industry that Google might go for. Like if you're Google and have abundance of cash and resources, you could do, an AI in big industry. But if you're a startup, you want to do more of a safer bet. What would that be as like a non-Google sized company? And what kind of industry would you recommend for smaller startups to do?
That's kind of an interesting conversation. I also keep having this with a lot of other people as well. And there's another flavor to it as well around what kind of companies are safe from big tech so that don't get cannibalized by like Microsoft or Google or OpenAI and so on. So I would say if you're really, really passionate about something, just go for it, which I know is easier said than done because like you could very well still have apprehensions about this and also be scared whether your startup or your idea would be relevant 2 years down the line. But here's the thing, if you're really passionate about it, that kind of indicates a really good connection or a really good degree of acquaintance with that space. And if it's niche enough, it's very likely that it's too small a market for any big tech company to go for. So if it's of order of like say hundreds of millions or even $1 billion, it doesn't seem like a big enough thing for big tech to go for. So it kind of protects you in some way. It's a very super niche. It's a space that you love. So it's probably something you are acquainted with. It's probably something you are very well aware of. You have good connections in the space. You know what the user wants. So yeah, so it's basically a signal coming from within you. Like if you really like it, it's probably a good idea to go for it. Apart from that, basically finding a space which is safe enough to innovate in is kind of hard to predict these days, given the fact that, so for example, a lot of companies had really good PDF summarization products for a while after OpenAI came out with ChatGPT, but didn't last for too long because, well, it's a small iterative development that you could do on top of existing foundation models. And once you integrate that into Chrome, or let's say OpenAI comes up with they did eventually do it. Once that happens, the market basically goes away. So yeah, so it's really difficult to predict what would be a safe bet, but anything which you think where you are well acquainted, where you are closer to the community, to the users than anyone else is, that should ideally be a safe bet, I would say.
Okay, and there's also another discussion of, would you create on the application layer or would you create an AI model? And obviously, a lot of big companies are investing billions into building foundational models, and you're often advised to build on the application layer because that's a safer bet. But then also, that's an easier way around where you don't have a lot of technical moat protecting you from other startups. From your perspective as like a Google machine learning engineer, if you were to do a startup, would you do it on the application layer or the infrastructure? Where would you think would be a good place to build a startup?
Again, there are multiple sides to this discussion as well. One would be, that's a very valid point, that if you're trying to build foundation models yourselves, you're kind of trying to fight on the turf of big tech companies already, because there's a lot of investment required. First of all, you need huge computational resources, you need a huge amount of data. But at the same time, if you have all of those resources sorted out somehow, there's not a lot of barrier between you and the foundation models today, right? For example, most of the research that most of these companies do eventually do come out. Papers are published almost every day, and a lot of research is actually happening in universities by PhD students. So the delta in what you can build in terms of the model architecture is not that big. The delta basically comes from being able to train those models, like the computational resources and the data. So if you think that you could sort those two things out, it's not a bad idea to go after foundation models, I think. Because, like I said, if you could throw data and compute at it, you could make really good models as well. There's this company, Character AI, it got recently acquired, like kind of acqui-hired, like a lot of very senior executives got basically moved to Google. They did kind of that, like they didn't have, again, their product was kind of very niche. They were working in a domain where foundation models were not doing that well at the point they were working on it. And they did a lot of innovation themselves as well. But yeah, they were in a domain where foundation models weren't doing good. They had access to resources for computation, and they had access to data and all of those things. They went for it, and their models were really, really good. They still are, kind of. So that's one side of the discussion. The other is, what if you do not have access to a lot of compute, a lot of data to throw at your model? Well, then that's kind of a challenge, a bigger challenge. If you're really into research, then there are still ways to get around that. You could basically do research and not go for business. But if you want to build a business around foundation models itself, then that becomes a challenge, because the barrier to do that because of the compute and data is kind of high at this point of time. So yeah, in those cases, I think application layer would be a better place to start, better place to find a niche in. Again, application layer could be some very tiny iteration or some very tiny wrapper on top of what already exists, and it could go all the way to very specific, huge technology stacks, which are basically built out to support very niche product or very niche market space. For example, I worked with a startup briefly as a mentor who were involved in almond farming in a very specific locality in California. And they were basically second generation farmers themselves. So they were very well aware of the problems that existed in the space, the legal hurdles required to bring any tech into it. And they were also very well aware of how the tech is evolving and how the tech is working. So if you find yourself in that kind of an intersection where you're very well aware of the problem situation and it's a very, very small niche, and you're very sure that you could handle all of the use cases and the problems that are there, I would say go for it. That's an amazing, it's a good thing to do for the society, and it's a great business model as well.
Got it. I think Okay, so if you have a particular business knowledge, or if you have any sort of proprietary data, then maybe going into building a startup around AI would be a good idea. But there's always a question of, okay, like you're saying AI something, but is it a language model or is it just a normal plain vanilla AI? I feel like the word AI gets flown around by itself, and a lot of these things are just normal AI that's been around for decades, whereas some of them are more of an agentic system, more of a things that you can only do with a language model. So I think the question is, you know, what would you do with that? Like if you're building a startup, like what do you exactly need a language model for? Or what can you just accomplish with a normal AI that's been around?
The fact that the word AI gets thrown around a lot is kind of a function of what VCs expect, it seems. There's kind of a cycle there. So if you start getting more funding when you quote AI, you basically are incentivized to quote more of that, right? Whether or not you're using LLMs or whether or not using deep tech. And I don't have any issues with that. It's totally fine. Like technically speaking, recommended systems are AI, and it's very easy to build one and deploy one, and it's not that expensive either to train small systems. So yeah, I think if you want to say that you're using AI, there are a lot of ways to do that. Where and where not to use big models, LLMs more specifically, is kind of a separate, more complicated discussion. If you are serving, let's say, a few thousands of customers, it doesn't make a lot of difference whether you use LLMs for some simple tasks like detecting happiness, like polarity scores, whether someone's happy with a review or not, or something like that. But there are easier and better ways to do that as well, more efficient ones. But it doesn't make a lot of difference whether or not you use LLMs, because LLMs do pretty well on these jobs as well. But then once you start to scale up to, let's say, millions of users, then the costs of LLMs kind of go way up because of the absolute user count. And then there's latency and privacy constraints as well, because you would typically be using an API, you would be sending data across internet, waiting for that to come back, and like, so yeah, in those situations where latency or privacy or like scale becomes a problem, it usually makes a lot more sense to go for more efficient solutions which have been deployed in production, which the industry knows well about, which have been documented, and like, yeah, just make the whole thing cheaper in that way.
Fair enough. I think a good, there you go. Okay, I think a really good example of a very successful AI startup is obviously like a code developer, like a GitHub Copilot, and Cursor, and Codium. And I don't know if you guys read the news yesterday or 2 days ago. OpenAI is in talks with Codium to acquire, or maybe, not too sure about the details, but the price tag is $3 billion to acquire Codium. And obviously that's a lot of money. And that's essentially a way for them to defend themselves against Cursor and similar companies like that. What do you think of this deal as someone who's, you know, obviously Google is probably trying to create something similar. I'm not too sure, but there's no reason not to. What do you think of this deal? What's your take on it?
Again, I'm kind of hazy about the exact details. I've only read the headline as well myself, so I don't know the exact user count that Codium had and like what exactly their tech stack looked like. I've not personally used their product either, so I can't kind of vouch for that either. But yeah, there are some acquisitions, I would say, which are meant to keep your users in your orbit, kind of in your ecosystem. And it doesn't always have to be a function of what the product currently is and the number of users it currently has. If it's good enough, and if you can get a lot more people to lock into your ecosystem using that acquisition, it makes sense to acquire. So that might be one of the angles. I'm not sure, again, like what their exact logic was. But yeah, like you said, the Cursor is one of a fast-growing kind of competitors in that space, right? And Cursor is kind of open in the sense that you could plug it into any LLM, I guess, any API, as long as you have the key to it. So this, I believe, as it goes on, would be very much bound to ChatGPT's coding models and further iterations of that. So yeah, it seems like one way to keep the developer community revolving around ChatGPT models, and the finance has made sense to someone, it seems.
While we're on the topic of this co-pilot thing,
Mm-hmm.
obviously it 10x, 100x is individuals' productivity, and more people, or I guess people can simply do more with shorter amount of time. And obviously the elephant in the room is, okay, are we gonna need developers in 10 years and things like that? With this hyper productivity of individuals, what do you think the future of work looks like? Are people going to work less? Are people going to work more? Would it not change? What's your take on that?
That's kind of very hard to predict, because at least in the short term, I could see there would be a lot of things changing. The nature of work would change a lot. The nature of job market, the way it evolves, and the pay scales and all those things would shift quite a bit in the short run. But then, I'm kind of a workaholic person. I need work to find purpose and meaning in life, and I'm pretty sure I am surrounded by people like that living in the Bay Area. So on behalf of all of the workaholics, I could pretty confidently say that we'll find some way to keep working, to find to make our time useful one way or the other. As to the question of what we would be working on, well, that's difficult to predict. It seems like so there's also this other aspect of us predicting the future based on the current volume of work that is being done in the world. There's no guarantee that this won't go up, right? I mean, yeah, it's true that one person may become 20x more productive, but I would bet that we would be doing a lot more work as a society, on the scale of humanity as a whole. And when we are doing a lot more work, each person being more productive basically only means that you'll still be working, you would be working a lot more, probably on less repetitive tasks, which is not an entirely bad thing, because you would be able to offload some things off to a system which is good at searching, indexing, coming up with patterns, and you could be focusing more on creative sides of things. Again, I'm kind of just being very abstract and philosophical in this matter, because there's no solid way to predict how things would turn out to be. But yeah, it seems like curiosity and adaptability would be the most important skills going forward. And as long as you're willing to put in the work, as long as you're curious enough to learn new things, adapt to new ways of working, adapt to new kinds of work that is being done, it should be fine, I would say. It should be okay.
Awesome. Maybe change the topic a little bit, and I want to talk about startups again. Well, mostly because I'm a founder myself, but it's really hard to tell what startups are going to do well, because 2 years ago, everyone was very excited about, startups like Jasper and but a certain amount of AI rappers, so they've called. And it's hard to tell what's going to work. A lot of people said this AI code generator may not work because a lot of people are working on it, but it seems like companies are doing well. Cursor's doing extremely well. So or I guess you can just, shout names, which startups do you think, what kind of startups do you think are going to do well? Is there any particular startup that you're really excited about?
I would definitely not call out names. Not stepping on that minefield. But what kind of startups would do well? Well, again, bringing up the whole niche thing. I think the ones which are focused, very, very, very properly focused on a really good user experience and on a domain which they are passionate about and working on or have been working on for a while, I think those kinds of companies would have the most time, the most user traction going forward, because generalized products are hard to pin down. First of all, and the second thing being, generalized products also tend to have bigger markets. So for any company which is trying to scale up or which already has good amount of funding at its disposal, they would try to target generalized markets as soon as they possibly can, because that's going to be the ladder, right? You focus on a niche as much as you possibly can, build a really good product in that field. And as you get more and more funding, as you get more and more traction, you try to build out a more general form of that, and then a more general form of that. So like anything which tries to work horizontally across a lot of different things, that space would really be. I would think that a lot of really well-funded companies and startups would be going for that space. But niches are usually the ones which like you can build out. You could spend time trying to figure things out, trying to have a good technology stack ready for deployment, and then climb up the ladder after that once you have good amount of funding, I would say. But yeah, apart from that, I think anything which makes life easy for users, which does not already exist, is a good idea to go for. No one can guarantee it would do good, and no one can guarantee that a big company won't come in and eat your lunch. But like that's the kind of uncertainty I guess that startups have to deal with usually anyway.
Awesome. Would love to open it up to the audience if anybody of you have questions for Suyash. All good? All right. Okay, cool. Well, please give a round of applause to Suyash. Thank you all so much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, cool. I think that's the end of our agenda. Maybe I explained what we do as a service earlier this event. We do a lot of engineering services, so feel free to go to our website qlay.ai, and if you book a demo with us right now, we're offering 400 engineering hours for free. I think that could be something that a lot of you guys could potentially leverage. Other than that, thank you all so much for coming. We have a lot of leftover pizzas and drinks, so feel free to grab it, and I'll see you all soon. Ciao.